The Leafs' next trade has been revealed as a brand new report has dropped, revealing some huge information as it pertains to Brad Treliving's trade plans, as we are now 48 hours away from the trade deadline. We're going to break down that report and discuss what it means going forward, as it has Leafs fans fired up. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into it, if you're part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, as we're on the road now to 16,000 subscribers. Thank you guys for your continued support. But Darius, a lot to go over today. It's yet another day. The Leafs do play tonight, so it's going to be interesting to see if any trades go down before that. We have some new reports as it pertains to trades. And let's dive right into it because things are getting crazy. We covered a lot of the targets yesterday, a lot of the new reports that have continued to drop over the past few hours and few days here. And this one from James Myrtle is very interesting because he is very confident. It's the first time we've seen from a reporter to make a prediction as it pertains to the Leafs trade moves this close to the deadline. James Myrtle says he thinks the Leafs end up with one of Scott Laughton or Yanni Gourde. He doesn't think Luke Shen will happen as the front office has their eyes on other defensemen. Connor Dewar, Ryan Reeves, Nick Robertson, and Pat Shreddy are all candidates to help clear cap. And there's more to this report, but I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm starting to come to the realization that Yanni Gourde is a very likely possibility. At this point, we heard his name in the past, and then he got injured, but now he is on the brink of returning. So it seems like the type of player that the Leafs would pursue, especially if Seattle is being reasonable with their price on this player, because we know that the Flyers aren't being reasonable with Scott Laughton.
Yeah, we've heard the whole time that Seattle has been pretty reasonable in terms of asking prices for their players too. So I think that, after everything we've heard the last 2 days, specifically from Brad Treliving and all the new reports and the fact that, the Flyers essentially want Fraser Minten straight up for Scott Laughton, which is insane. I think the most likely scenario now for the Toronto Maple Leafs is they're going to go out, they're going to get two players, and they're going to be from the same team, and it's going to be Seattle. I think it's going to be Yanni Gourde, of course, as one. He just returned from injury. That was a big thing. Is he going to return from injury in time for the trade deadline? And what does that look like? He just did yesterday. He looked great. He was mixing it up in scrums. I love that stuff. And I think it's Jamie Alexiak as well from the Seattle Kraken. He's a 6'7" defenseman. He's exactly what the Leafs want in terms of what a defenseman looks like, and he can play both sides. He can play the right as well. So I think that he's a versatile player that can do that. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing, but I think the asking price for Laughton is just too high, and I don't think they're going to do anything overwhelming in terms of like Rantanen or anything. It would probably happen by now. I don't think they would wait for something like that for the last minute. So could get very interesting, but I think that I also thought that it was interesting that Myrtle didn't name any defensemen. So I think that it is probably going to be Jamie Alexiak. There's another guy we're going to talk about in this video as well that could interest Leafs fans. So could get pretty interesting.
Yeah, and with Yanni Gourde returning, it opens up a very interesting option. And the interesting part of this as well, the tweet and the report, is the last part. Robertson, Reeves, Dewar. There's a good chance now that even though we're hearing that they're probably going to keep Nick Robertson and that Nick Robertson did rescind his trade request, it also seems like there is a good chance that they move someone else. They're going to have to, obviously, in order to make the cap space work for any trade. And as pertains to Scott Laughton, as many as 8 teams are calling on Scott Laughton, one of them being the Leafs. GM Danny Briere is in no rush to make a deal as the center market shrinks. First round picks are on the table, but the offers could improve as the week progresses. So it seems that other teams are willing to offer first round picks for Scott Laughton, according to Darren Dreger here, that the offers could improve and get even better than that. I can't imagine the Leaf, maybe their 2026 first round pick is on the table. Maybe that would be something that the Leafs have offered, but the price for Scott Laughton, even according to this report, as we're now inching closer and closer, it seems like Laughton, even though it's very realistic, I don't know if the Leafs are willing to give up the pick, but maybe they're one of the teams with the first round pick on the table, in which case maybe we're wrong about what Brad Treliving values Scott Laughton.
Yeah, I think that, when you look at Scott Laughton, it's interesting everything we've heard the last couple of days. And the reason I say that is because obviously it sounds like 7 other teams are willing to part with their first rounder, but the Leafs don't have a first rounder this year. So obviously it would be a 2026 first rounder. But from everything we've heard, the Flyers, at least specifically to Toronto, want Fraser Minten, right? So if the Flyers are looking at other teams, they're like, hey, we're going to wait a couple of days. We're going to wait closer to the deadline to see, if we can get a little bit more, if somebody's going to, really bring this offer over the top. When it comes to the Leafs or when it pertains to the Leafs specifically, they might just be like Fraser Minten or don't talk to me, right? Like, so I think that's kind of where that's at. So it looks like that's not going to happen at this point because that would be bad. I think that would be bad business for Brad Treliving and the Leafs. If it was a first round pick, you don't know what that first round pick is going to be. I think that can be, easier to swallow in that way. So again, I think it's bad business if you're trading Fraser Minten for Scott Laughton at this point. I think Fraser Minten has a higher ceiling than Scott Laughton. I think that he's eventually going to be maybe a better player than him too. and a very responsible player, and it's hard to find those in the NHL. So I wouldn't trade off of him. Although, if it was a bigger name, if it was a Mikko Rantanen, right, like we talked about, or somebody, that would bring more to the team, I would be more open to that. But again, in this situation specifically, doesn't look like this is going to happen anymore. But you never know, right? As we get closer to the deadline, maybe the Flyers would be like, oh my God, we just pinned ourselves against the wall here. Maybe we do have to give him up for a second round pick. Although I don't think that's the case. I think they'd rather hang on to him, and I think he'd rather stay in Philly for that anyway.
Something to keep an eye on as well is Scott Laughton is not a very good center this season. He's been playing the wings most of the time, and their coach in Philadelphia has said that they prefer him playing on the wing rather than the center. Torts does. So, I mean, ultimately, if they're getting him, they're playing Fraser Minton for a guy. I mean, they'll probably put him at third line center because he is better than Max Domi at this point, but that's not saying a whole lot as we continue to inch closer and closer to that. So those are your thoughts on that. But surrounding Yanni Gourde, he said that he felt like his old self last night in his first game since January 2nd. Lots of teams paying attention to the pending UFA forward ahead of Friday's deadline. So regarding Yanni Gourde, you see here, I think your best bets to seeing at the trade deadline will be Yanni Gourde and Connor Murphy, 50% retained for this season and next. We can pivot to Connor Murphy as well, a defenseman here. But Yanni Gourde is a very solid player that we have had our eyes on forever now, it feels like. And ultimately, this is probably, if I had to make a prediction now what move it would make, it would definitely be between these two guys. I'd probably start to lean towards Yanni Gourde. I don't think he would require a first round pick, though you never really know at this juncture with the cost of everybody, but a very responsible player and also good defensively, and kind of falls under that Craig Berube mindset and shift there. And he's put together a pretty very good career, of course, but a very decent season as well. 17 points in 36 games. Keep in mind he was injured for a little bit there as well for a while. So he's back. He feels good, and this might be a decent option for Brad Treliving.
I think the only reason we've been talking about Scott Laughton ad nauseum is because he has term with his contract, so it fits what the Leafs wanted. At one point, we were thinking it was going to cost less, but I don't think that's the case anymore, right? So obviously, his contract was really appealing and everything that it brings to the table, and the fact that he's from here. But when you look at Yanni Gourde, I mean, this year, he's had a decent year, like you said, 17 points in 36 games. But, what he brings to the table other than that as a centerman, I think is very valuable. Yes, he makes a little bit more. Obviously, you're not going to take on his full cap hit. We're almost done the year now, right? And maybe there's room for retained salary with the Seattle Kraken and a bigger deal like getting Jamie Alexiak as well. But what he brings is very valuable. And I mean, he's a pest. I'll use that word. He really is. We saw it last night in his first game back. He's in scrums. He's starting stuff. We're starting to see that from McMahon, even Robertson a little bit from that third line, a little bit of that identity we've been talking about. So I think that would be a pretty good mix there on that third line. That would be a third line that would be very, very hard to play against. So I've always liked this option. I just think we got away from it a little bit because obviously he hasn't played for a while. He's been injured. He makes more. So again, I think it's a pretty good option. When you look at Connor Murphy from the Chicago Blackhawks too, this is a very good defenseman on a not good team, right? Like he can add a lot to the Leafs. So right shot defenseman as well, relatively young. I think it could make a ton of sense, but you're probably going to have to give up quite a bit in this trade. So again, I think it's more likely that the Leafs actually get two players from one team than it is that they make two separate deals because of where the cap is. And Calle Yarncroke just returned. We don't know what's happening with that either. So could be very interesting, but I like this player. I think if he was on a better team, he would have a much better result. His advanced analytics would look differently. So could be an interesting option for the Leafs too. But I think right now, if I was to guess what Brad Treliving is thinking right now, is probably Yanni Gourde and Jamie Alexiak.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And a bunch of new reports are going to come and drop. Again, the Leafs play a late game tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, I believe, is the puck drop. So it's going to be a late one, but at the same time, they need to bounce back after that, what I will call an abysmal loss in their last game. But let us know down below what your thoughts are. Thank you guys for watching.